Video evidence has emerged of what appears to be the first loss of a Challenger 2 tank in Ukraine's counteroffensive. What happened and what does this mean for the war? So what does this video clip show us? First of all, it's clearly in the heat of battle. This is very likely to be at Robotyne, which is right on the front line where the Ukrainian forces are pushing into the Russian defences to the east of Zaporizhzhia. The first thing you notice is the turret is still attached to the tank. If that had been a former Soviet Union tank, the lid of the tank, as they call it, would have been detached to the main tank and would have led to certain death of those on board, whereas this tank is still intact. The second thing we notice about the footage is that there's a baffle about halfway down the barrel of the tank. That is consistent with a Challenger 2, so it helps us identify what sort of tank it is. The main challenge is whether or not this tank has actually been destroyed or disabled. It might look an inferno, but the harsh reality is that modern Western battle tanks are extremely difficult to destroy. The hull shape is V-shaped, it tends to vector thrusts away from minefields, etc. And whilst the extremities can catch fire, fuel dumps and the tracks can be shed, in reality, drag it back to a workshop, put it through a maintenance and it can be recovered again. So whilst the footage looks pretty dramatic, it is not evidence that the Challenger 2 has been destroyed. So what does that video footage tell us about Ukraine's use of these tanks in the war? Ukraine to date has been using modern Western battle tanks actually at some way back. Because of their precision effects, their laser targeting and their ability to strike targets about 2 miles away with very good accuracy, they've not been used right on the front line. But what this does show is that the Ukrainians are clearly making progress through the Russian defences, otherwise they wouldn't put a tank in that peril. What's also evident is that the Ukrainians have claimed that they've lost 6 of the Western battle tanks over the course of this offensive. They actually have 104 available to them, and there's many more that are due to arrive very shortly. So when we set this in context, Russia has lost well over 2,000 tanks since the start of this war. And therefore, the very fact that Russia is, in a way, celebrating the loss of a single Western battle tank just demonstrates the huge gulf in difference in capability between the Russian tanks and the Western tanks. So will the loss of this Challenger 2 tank, if indeed it has been lost, affect the overall war effort? The answer is almost certainly no. It does demonstrate that tanks are not indestructible, even Western battle tanks. And it's also evident that Ukraine love operating this tank. They feel protected, they love the fact that it offers precision effect, and they feel relatively invulnerable, which is fantastic. But the real test will come when Ukraine makes a breakthrough, because the layered defences that are in place at the moment obstruct the real use of a tank. But once the Ukrainians have broken through that, they'll be gaining momentum, and these Western tanks will be the tip of the sword of that impact. So the loss of one tank, whilst it is unfortunate, that demonstrates that Challenger 2 can be destroyed potentially, it is worth noting that this tank might yet see another day of war. So given that one Challenger may well have been lost, the question obviously arises, will the UK send more tanks to replace it? Well, the harsh reality is that the UK has a very limited number of Challenger 2 tanks, and we need some in our inventory to protect our national interests. So while never say never, it looks unlikely that the UK would have the capacity to send too many more tanks. But it is worth remembering that the US have already committed to sending Abrams modern battle tanks, and in the top trumps world, the Abrams is one of the very best in the world. And we're expecting to see the first assignment of those tanks arrive in the middle of September, with the rest of them due to arrive at the end of the year. There's also moves amongst Western allies to send more Leopard 2 tanks, which again have proven remarkably effective. So although we have to wait and see with the progress of this spring offensive, it looks very likely that if modern battle tanks, particularly Western battle tanks, are able to make a key impact, undoubtedly the West will be keen to provide whatever Ukraine needs to prevail in this conflict.